I watched Robin Roberts' masterclass on effective and authentic communication at least 3 times and extracted the most practical tips from it so that you don't have to purchase or watch it. Here are all the chapters in her masterclass besides the one where they introduce her. What we're going to do is give you an overview of each of the chapters, tell you the most practical tips that we can apply in our day-to-day communications, and finally rate that chapter on a scale of 1 to 5. 5 obviously being the highest. Now keep in mind that this is my opinion and it's given from the point of view of our main viewership, who are students or working professionals. Robin Roberts is a TV personality. She's the anchor of ABC's Good Morning America. So if you're into journalism or TV or anchoring, this is 100% must watch. But for people in corporate life or who are still studying, here are the main tips that you can utilize from this entire training. Let's get started. Let's start off with the very first chapter, which is make your mess your message. The main gist of this chapter is that she's trying to tell us if we've had any difficult times or anything that we might be embarrassed of, to make those weaknesses into our message. She gives us an example of how she made her mess of having breast cancer into her message to not just help her get through this difficult time, but to inspire others as well. She goes on to say that we don't have to be a TV personality to make our mess our message, but anyone can do it even in their day-to-day lives. She goes on to give the example of how a lady who was going through a traumatizing incident went and spread her message across to the world. Because of the response that she received, she started her own organization surrounding this topic.
What is it that you feel is your challenge? What is it that you feel you can share and help with others? Only you know that. And find your path in your journey to make your mess your message.
Now, we're not told what this traumatic incident was, but she says that no matter who you are, even if you do it in a small scale, you can still keep sharing your message across. It's one of the main things that help us become more authentic communicators and don't make us come across somebody who's extra polished. I felt that this chapter makes a lot of sense for anybody looking to build their personal brand. When you take a particular hardship and make that your consistent story, people start resonating with it, and that can allow you to form a community. For example, Gary Vaynerchuk has taken his mess about being an immigrant, failing in school, into his message, where now he keeps on saying that, and people who are immigrants or who are bad at school can resonate a lot more with him. Based on the practicality of this chapter, I'll give it a 4 on 5. Because one criticism I do have is that it's difficult to apply this principle at your workplace. Can't go around creating a mess or a message in a professional setting all the time. Chapter 2, sharing and embracing vulnerability. Now, I was pretty disappointed in this chapter because it strayed away into the self-help space, and hence it went away from practical lessons. Most of this chapter revolves around her reporting Hurricane Katrina. The story that she shares is very gripping because her hometown, her family, is in the place where the disaster happened. And they show clips of her actually reporting from that area. And you can see her crying while the cameras are rolling.
They're okay.
They're okay?
Great.
Because I know they're right there on the Gulf Coast. Mom's okay, sister's okay?
They're all right.
I'd give this chapter a 2 out of 5 simply because there weren't too many lessons to showcase our vulnerability, especially in the work environment. And it did seem a little idealistic in nature. Number 3 is making an authentic connection. Here she talks about having better conversations and connecting with people on a deeper level. But the points that she shares on an objective level are very basic. Here they are. Have a genuine interest in other people. Talk to someone in person instead of over call or text. Have good manners and be sincere. Nothing really life-changing over here, something that we would consider as common knowledge, and hence this chapter gets a 2 out of 5. Now, the next chapter is something that I was very, very keen on watching, which is on public speaking. And this was one of my favorite lessons because it's packed with practical tips that you and I can start applying immediately. Here are the golden nuggets. She talks about maintaining eye contact effectively when you're on stage. So if you're like me and you get nervous looking at somebody in the eye while speaking, try to look right above their eye line.
I also find it helpful, especially if it's a larger group where you're feeling a little uncomfortable.
This will make it look like we're seeing them right in the eye without actually having to do so. She also says that to calm our nerves down, we have to find people in the audience who are nodding along with us. These are people who are genuinely interested in our topic, and we need to divert our attention mainly towards them instead of people who have judgmental looks.
There's always somebody in the audience that is looking at you and hanging on your every word. You find that person. Don't find the person who's looking down on their phone and you feel like, oh my gosh, they don't even like. Find that person who is looking at you and is engaged, and then speak to that person. make your speech to that person.
She also tells us that we don't need to script our talks because that prevents us from speaking and instead makes us memorize. That can come across as inauthentic, ineffective, and just overall lacks impact. She does say that if you have to go with certain points, don't go with a script, but make a few bullet notes.
An index card, and would just make sure that I had the key points that I wanted to hit.
And the more we do end up going on stage, we'll realize that we don't need those notes at all and we can just speak directly. She also offers an amazing tip on better enunciation. She says that when she used to read from a teleprompter, with certain words, she would repeat the vowel multiple times. So for example, if we take the word nice, instead of typing it as N-I-C-E, she would type it as N-I-I-I-I-I-C-E. Nice. This allowed her to practice enunciation.
Any vowels, I would just put an extra or two in there to make me know to enunciate and to take my time with that word.
And it's an exercise that we can apply as well if we find it hard to enunciate. And finally, she shares the tip of power posing. If you're feeling nervous before a presentation, use the Superman or Wonder Woman pose. Standing like this for a bit before a presentation, interview, or meeting can help trigger more confident emotions because our body language directly affects our mood.
This is something you should try too. I always suggest this. The Wonder Woman pose.
You can learn more about this in a TED Talk by Amy Cuddy on body language. Next chapter is on job interviews. I quite like this chapter because it's not basic advice like show up on time and be confident, greet people with a smile, but she has a pretty amazing takeaway, which is to not ask for a job, but ask for advice. She gives her own example over here, that when she wanted to become a sports news reporter, in her time there weren't many black women who were doing that. So when she went to her potential employer, she didn't ask for a job, she simply asked for advice. And after they spoke to her, they realized they have someone really authentic and effective. Unfortunately, the role she wanted was taken at the time, but she was so genuine and she managed to impress the employer so much that they created a position for her.
He contacted me some months later and created a position. I was the lifestyles reporter at WSMV.
And that entry helped her climb the ranks and become who she is today. She gives an example of when she was on the other side and somebody else came to her asking for advice. They played their reel, asked for tips on how to get better, and when they left, and Robin Roberts was so impressed by her talent that she went back to the crew and told them to get this person on board.
And I just want you to see, and any advice that you could give me on how I covered it. So I'm watching, and I'm like going, dang, she's good. Don't you think I ran into our talent department and said, this is somebody that you all need to look at? And again, she did not ask me for a job.
I never thought about job interviews on that level, that instead of applying like every other candidate, we find the right people. It's okay if we get rejected at times, but if we can ask for advice, learn from them, and in that process, showcase our talent and our authenticity, that'll help us stand out and get way ahead in terms of getting that job. She also provides a couple of extra tips, which is that after the interview is complete, to follow up diligently, but not be pushy about it. A good time to wait is ideally 1 or 2 weeks after the interview is complete if you've not heard back from the other person.
I often appreciate when I hear from somebody again, and it's somebody who has reached out asking for something. I'm thinking, thank you, because I really wanted to reach out to you.
And she gives a networking tip which I absolutely love and I'm going to try out soon. She says that when you meet someone who you look up to, take a picture with them and then go ahead and frame that picture and give it to that person. It acts as a sweet gesture, but more importantly, the next time you call or follow up with that person, they remember our face. I quite like the tips over here, so this chapter gets a 4 out of 5. Next is communicating your value at work. Now this chapter has some general information and I hate it when a chapter starts with know your worth. It's not really helpful, but she did have one amazing point which she communicated through a story. This point focused around how you can stand out from the rest of your colleagues. She tells a story about how she had to go to Abu Dhabi for a work trip and everyone wanted to go with her. But this one particular colleague, this young girl, instead of asking to just come along, gave her a list of things that she felt she could do to add value to that particular trip from a work standpoint. That clearly communicated her value and showed how she can contribute to this trip as opposed to just tagging along. And that can spark a lot of inspiration within ourselves to stand out at work.
She actually showed me, had written down, and she always does that. She always has a full proposal in what she wants to do, which is part of the reason why I'm so grateful that I hired her.
Instead of focusing on asking for things to show how we can add value to a particular task, even if we are asking for a promotion, can help us get there much faster. There is more information around things like building win-win situations with colleagues and being sincere at work. And again, found that a little too generic. So this chapter gets a 3 out of 5. Now the next chapter is an interesting one where she takes us behind the scenes to Good Morning America. Now this is again not very helpful for people like you and me who have regular jobs. If you work in TV or media, this can help a lot. But it was still an interesting watch, just from an entertainment perspective. However, there is one tip which I absolutely loved. There's a segment where she needs to put out the main points before going on air. And she has to deliver news which is alarming and some news which is general. When she does that, she makes sure to change her tone to communicate the emotion of the message. So instead of reading it like a robot, her tone keeps variating to make sure she communicates the message beyond the words she's speaking.
Powerful storms closing in right now, threatening holiday travel, with flooding and more than a foot of snow, already causing chaos on the roads and at the airport. More than 400 flights already canceled, alerts stretching into the east. And the big question about the Thanksgiving parade, will heavy winds keep those famous balloons on the ground? Beating Black Friday, how to game your shopping and your credit card to come out debt-free. And it's very important in voiceover that you let your voice reflect the tone of the story.
One practical tip, the rest of it not so much, but still a fun watch. This chapter gets a 3.5 out of 5. Next chapter is communicating for television. Now, again, not something useful for people who go to office or have their own companies which are not in media. The topic is way too niche and does not show anything that we can apply in our day-to-day lives. So this gets a 1 out of 5. Now, the next chapter, although it is focused around TV, it does have a lot of practical tips that we can apply. And it's around interviewing people for TV. The reason I like this chapter is because Robin Roberts is a master interviewer. She knows how to make someone feel comfortable and get the best information out of them without being a people pleaser. One tip that she shares is how she talks to people even before the camera starts rolling. This allows her to build rapport and make the other person feel comfortable sharing vulnerable information.
Don't really have to talk about what it is that you're going to interview them about. Just showing an interest in who they are, making them feel comfortable, the people that are around them.
We can do this before a sales call, a meeting with a client, or even before an interview. It can highly up our chances of being liked by the other person and hence increase the chances of getting what we want from that conversation. They also show a few amazing interviews that she's taken, which are fun to watch, and there's no real tip that I could extract from this, but if you do watch her in action, you can observe and learn how she makes the other person feel comfortable just because of her energy. The way she follows up with the other person, the way she listens, the way she responds, her body language, all of it is great observational knowledge. And it's something that I feel we can apply even in normal conversations. This lesson gets a 3.5. Now, the last chapter is around living life with optimism and resiliency. Now, this chapter completely went away from practical communication tips and went way too much in the self-help section. There was nothing of practical use over here. It was quite a downer from all the valuable information she provided before, and hence this chapter gets a 1 out of 5. That brings our total up to, drum roll please, 29 out of 50. Lower rating than I expected, but yeah, objectively reviewing every chapter does help. Having said that, the most benefit I got from this is to see a great communicator in action. There are a lot of things that I can't articulate that I learned by just watching her to come across as more authentic, more likable, and more effective as a communicator. Despite the ratings, I still recommend you watch this masterclass. Or if you just want the main tips, here they are. And now if you're looking to become a more persuasive communicator, instead of just effective and authentic, we've reviewed Daniel Pink's masterclass on sales and persuasion, which you can check out right here.